Hello and welcome to the Joyful Rebels podcast, where rebellion meets wellness. We've got Claire and Donna Thomas here, your mother daughter duo, and we are here to bring you our insight, some science, and maybe share some laughs in
Hmm.
this, our pursuit of finding more peace, joy, and balance in our physical and mental health. Thank you for listening today, for joining us as we discuss some practical tips to empower you on your journey to living your best life. And
Mm.
today, we're going to call this a holiday edition, right, Mom? All right.
Yep.
This is, if you're listening to this is December 2024. So, we've got holiday season. If you're watching on YouTube, I've got my little polar bear in the background with it. Bought at Target for a couple bucks day after Christmas last year. So, shout out to the people that do that type of shopping. But today we're going to talk about a really cool topic, Mom, that you found, which are the 5 C's of mental health. And so, this time of year, again, we mentioned it's holidays that might have brought up some feelings or emotions in you, or maybe you're already feeling certain ways dealing with the holidays. But in Joyful Rebels, we like to give some tips. We like to talk about areas where we have some agency, right? Some
Hmm.
choice and some control. We like to talk about strategies. And so that's what today is about. So we've got these 5 different categories that if you're feeling any certain type of way, feeling kind of lost, or you want to focus your attention intentionally somewhere where you can make some improvements or just gain some awareness, we've got 5 options for you. So, again, we're going to run through these 5 words that each start with the letter C. Hey, the 5 C's, and give some examples of how they're showing up for us, how they might be relevant to your holiday season. And for you listening, your job is to notice, listen and notice. Hey, does this show up for me? How might this be showing up for me? Some might be more relevant than others, and that's cool, right? It's going to be
Hmm.
different for each of us. So, Mom, did you have anything to add to that little spiel before we get into it?
Well, I think that when some things can sound familiar, I can tend to gloss over them. But if they're familiar, I want you to dial into it because there's something probably really specific that you're doing that you could tie to it and make it so it's personal instead of just having it be theoretical. And I love that because even if we're doing a holiday edition, some things that are showing up during a holiday season, you might see some of these things come into play in a little bit more technicolor. And so I just want to add that to the what I know of myself and my awareness and my self-reflection, because I feel then I continue to keep growing. And I don't want to have this holiday season just be a time where I'm either white knuckling it or I'm coasting or some of the other messaging that I feel like I get from the world that's just like, you know, time out, just take a check out. Like, no, there's still things to learn, there's still things to leverage. And also the good work that we've done individually as women, and I'm talking to the whole Joyful Rebel crowd, men too, that at this point we can use the skills that we have. And some of it is just knowing what is the landscape in front of us and to give ourselves a little credit because it matters. And hopefully the culmination of that is that we go through whatever season that we're in, whether it's got more of a heightened emotional state to it, but we enjoy it more. And I would like to just continue to ride the wave of things that are happening in my life and not have it be where, and I have before, where it's like we're getting into this season because this is what it means. I don't feel that way this year. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I can write it and feel pretty good because of all the awareness that I've been trying to stay with throughout the entire year. So let's celebrate the wins as we see fit. And I want you guys, as you're listening, to see how it's fitting in some just your daily, everyday interactions. Are you seeing some of these qualities play out?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about we tend to gloss over or when we hear something familiar, because right, we have certain topics that have come up before and oh yeah, I've heard this. And then rant, you check out, right? Or you have your default. I totally agree with you. That's when you should actually check in. Like, wait a second, make it personal. How does this apply to me? Because it's always worth taking another peek, right? Because even if it is something that has been constant for a while, like it's not going to be that way forever. Let's
Mm-mm.
check in and see how it's showing up. So we'll get started then with the first C in our holiday edition, the 5 C's of mental health, and that is competence. And so competence is a really important part when we're talking about promoting like positive mental health, because that's what we're talking about here, like
Hmm.
strategies, trying to cope, positive mental health. And so competence, what is that? Well, that's like your abilities and your skills to deal with things like challenges, tasks, stresses, the holiday season. And it can show up in a lot of different ways. So maybe that's social or familial competence, being able to deal with situations that are happening around you. It can be academic, it could be things happening in the workplace. But the idea is that when you're developing and focusing on competence in these different areas, then you might feel better equipped to deal with all the other stuff, to manage emotions, to cope with stress, because you're like, oh yeah, I have this ability, I have this skill, I've thought about this. So competence being able to help you deal with challenges. Mom, I'm wondering how you thought about this word competence, this category, and how it's showing up for you or how it can relate to navigating the holiday season.
Yeah, I can admit that this was the first C that we come to was not one that felt organic just by the name of it, like
Hmm.
competency. But as it is playing out in my life, it's really showing up in communication. So
Okay.
my communication skills and how that relates to problem solving, because it feels like there's always little fires to put out, and I can react to those, whether they're in a work situation or a personal situation. Like for sure, there's just a ton of little things all the time. And before I got to admit, they would build up. And they wouldn't be just little fires, they would turn into bigger fires. But if I can take a deep breath and just take a minute on that, then what I find is that I can problem solve better because I just ask more questions. I don't just take it upon myself to be like, I know this, I've been here before, I've got it. I'm like, let's get a little bit more information on this. And that provides me some emotional resiliency. I feel like my self esteem goes up a little bit because I learn and I don't feel like I just got to figure it all out by myself. And yet, when I can go through a situation where, let's say, plans don't come through where you thought they would, you had expected them to, like, well, what happened? What else can I do? And I don't just automatically take the emotional train to like, why did that happen to me? I can be an observer here. And that creates this, again, the resiliency and the ability to have a positive outlook comes from not just letting things happen to me. And a competency for me is knowing that being an observer and watching a situation for just a few moments, especially at the beginning as a situation is unfolding, I have a way better shot of feeling good about it, being able to make a pivot if I need
Mhm.
to behaviorally or situationally or whatever. Like I not so much that I get ahead of it, but I'm writing in tandem with what's happening in real time because I'm just kind of watching it instead of feeling like it's happening to me. That feels way better than feeling like I'm getting steamrolled by a season.
Yeah, I love that. I love how it brings in again having a little bit more control. And I like how you talk about the communication, because yeah, I feel like I agree. Competency, you're kind of thinking like, oh, am I taking some type of skills exam? But no, this can show up in all these different areas. And yes to communication. I mean, how many times, raise your hand if you've like put off an email or a text or some type of communication because you're just building it up in your head, right? You're letting that
Yeah.
stress kind of grow in, and if you're when you actually do it, then it's fine. You're like, oh, okay. Like I could have saved myself a lot by just staying on top of that type of communication. And I also love how you talk about, it's not always about what you're going to add, like worrying about what you're adding to the conversation, but asking more questions. That's something that I admittedly need to work on more as I'm trying to become even a better listener in all my relationships. And sometimes I feel the need to like fill a gap with conversation, but no, asking more questions, getting more clarity, um, is something that I'm working on. I know as we move forward, not just the holiday season, but kind of like all the time.
Me too. Work
Yeah.
in progress, but it's
Yes.
it's showing up here more where I feel like there's you almost get like time and a half for it because it can really create a situation where everybody feels seen and heard, And then that just gives this overall blanket resiliency and goodwill. And the more of that I can participate in, I want to.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I should mention this, but just because we're talking about communication, one of my things that has been showing up this holiday season is even how I'm emailing and how I want to
Mm.
be perceived through email. Um, I don't know if you're someone, if you're listening, who puts a lot of like exclamation points in your
Mm.
emails or your messaging, and to some point you're going back and like, wait, I'll replace this one with a period. I have just decided I'm going to go with a more maybe assertive, and I'm talking work emails here, more assertive, streamlined, like remove the extra fluff. And it's funny because it almost feels like I'm writing an email as a man would compared to a woman. Now, um, I won't get into all that. I will say that part of my PhD research involves gender. So that's definitely been on my mind a lot, but I just want to be more efficient with my emailing, and I just want
Mhm.
to say what I want to say and not add an extra paragraph about, well, maybe and sorry. Like I
Mhm.
remove all apologies from my emails,
Mhm.
and it feels so good. So I say that because maybe if you're listening, you're someone that maybe you notice that you do it or you don't, but it feels very empowering to just have a bit more of an assertive tone in my emails. And it's still professional. And again, I know we're talking about a very specific realm, but I'm enjoying it. It's giving me a little boost of like feeling better because I'm like, okay, I can still make my point without having to apologize for it. Because what am I even apologizing for? Like, how often? Oh, sorry, sorry. So, yes, that's also, I think, how it's showing
Yeah.
up for me.
Although funny you should say that because I agree with you on the clarity of speech and I even like economy of words. I
Hmm.
like that. But when I'm with clients one on one, I'm like, "Hi!" exclamation point. Like if I'm with one person and I know them and we have this more intimate relationship, I got all the exclamation points.
Yeah.
I got emojis in there because I'm
Yes.
talking to somebody and we are doing this thing that's got a more intimate feel. And I am excited to see them and I want them to know that. And
Yes.
I like to be able to toggle back and forth between that. And this is what's appropriate over here with this correspondence, and this works over here. And that to me is a sign of being able to use a skill set when it's necessary, as I
Yes.
can represent myself in a way that is authentic and real for the situation. And I haven't always been that way. And I've been that exclamation point girl in like work emails. I've been like, calm down, Donna.
Yeah, yeah, right. Oh, I had one up here. I should delete it over here. Yeah, no,
Yes,
I don't even
that's
want
true.
to erase that from the brain. And my friends would say probably that I send too many GIFs or GIFs or whatever. So yes, it's definitely context dependent. But I like how
Yes.
you reference being able to move back and forth between, oh, I'm in this area. How is my tone going to be? And that is a skill set, and one that I'm trying to work on. Work in progress, like you said. Um, but we'll move on to our second C here. So number one was competence. Number two is caring.
Mm,
So caring, we're going to argue, is another fundamental and important aspect when we're talking about mental health and our well-being. And, this can involve the sympathy that we have for others, empathy, empathy being more of understanding and sharing in the feeling and experiences of others, having compassion. So uh, the idea is when we're able to have this caring relationship, we're caring for others. When we receive care in return, that it's going to contribute to our emotional well-being. It helps us feel like we belong. And when we have these deeper connections, which we'll also talk about in a bit, that can help us in our relationships. And all of that overall benefits our mental health. And
mhm,
so this idea of caring then can be an important part. And it's probably going to show up a lot because this is a time of year where a lot of us, we still maintain the relationships that we have, but maybe we're even seeing people that we don't see all the time,
mhm.
especially family and friends that we don't. So how are you thinking about caring in terms of mental health?
Gosh, when I first took a look at this one, I had an initial sense, but then word came out of the back of my brain, and then it was almost as though there was a spotlight on it, and that's balance.
Mm,
The balance between caring for others and caring for ourselves. And this can get lost in a season where there are extra demands that involve other people, places, and things. And I do get a chance to touch base with clients that say that they are overwhelmed at the emotional load that they're carrying that is extra, and when to say no. And even if you can say no, like that doesn't even seem like that's an option,
Hmm.
but it is, allowing, keeping the balance between caring for ourselves and others, and not to let it just be like, I'm just going to give it up for myself because other people have needs right now. I've been there. For you guys that have littles, there's times when you feel like there's just more of a demand and urgency for people that don't understand delay. So I trust you to make that judgment, but to keep that there should be a balance always, and that's on a daily. Maybe you even break it up into the earlier part of the day, the middle part of the
Hmm.
day, the evening, and each one of those has its own set of yeses. And when the more demands come in, or more invitations even, that can be awesome, but you're like, that's a no. Like, that's a no from me, dog. I'm going to be Randy from what show is that?
Idol,
That's
American
Randy
Idol.
from Idol. Like, that's a no from me, dog. Because some of it is, even if it sounds good and you just don't have the bandwidth for it, or don't want to, or know that'll kick you right over, then it can be a no. It can be a no. So some of this isn't to get into January and then to be like, I got to dig out of a hole. We have opportunity right now to say yes to some of the things that we can. There's been a couple of holiday parties that I've already said no to. Only from that, I know what the rest of the week looked like. And it has, I don't ever want to be disrespectful to anybody, but I can say no for whatever the reason is. And that doesn't mean that I don't like those people or that person. And I hope that we're still in the same social circle and we can hang out. It's just not this time. And they're going to know it too, because they're busy doing their own thing. So I don't wait for permission to create a balance. That's the thing that I do know myself enough to know, like, this week is already too packed. I want positive relationships. I want a sense of belonging, because this is what caring does. And it helps us to feel less lonely. But question for you, Claire, and to you listeners, have you ever been in a group of people surrounded and yet you still felt lonely? Right? So it's
Yeah,
not like
yeah,
you have to say that. Like, we know what can help fill our bucket. We know that. And so for me, it's this: some yeses, some time in more solitude or quiet time. And that actually helps me feel less lonely because I'm more connected back to me and understanding the needs that I have. It's taken me a while to understand what an introvert I am. And that means how I recharge and how I get back some energy. And it's not always being around people at all. So, having a balance of caring for ourselves and caring for others, we are in prime time to have influence over that. So, Claire, is that showing up for you where there's been more demands or less demands, or guilt for saying yes or no? Any of that?
I just said no to a potluck on campus
Okay.
earlier, and they're like, "You have to." I was like, "No, no, I need," because you know what was more important is I knew I needed to have some lunch, not that type of
Mm.
lunch. I knew it was there. So I mean, but when I first read the about the caring, I had some ideas, but the way you just said it, it was like total light bulb. Like, oh, of course. Like, you're thinking so much about outpouring and the caring that you have for others, and man, that really has to reflect back to you too. So balance, I think, if you're going to take anything away from this section, you're listening, like balance and saying no being okay. Like, man, we could probably talk about that all day, but I wonder, like, I feel like self-imposed homework, like, is there something else that I can say no to that's on my plate? Because
Mm,
things do really tend to pile up, and some stuff is planned, but some stuff is last second. So maybe I'm even going to set some boundary for myself. Like, if something shows up and it's only a day's notice, like, it's just a hard no because my
yeah.
plate is too full already. And then already just saying that out loud, like, I feel a little bit better. Like, that feels like I have a little bit more control in that area. Like, oh, okay. So,
Yeah. Although one other thing on that, that in the spirit of wanting to be charitable, because I still feel that way too, like, this is a season where that's highlighted. I've chosen to look specifically at cashiers. Those are
mm,
the folks I want to be really nice to. Like, if you pick your person, pick your, service person, or, whoever that is in your world. Those are the people that I know are dealing with higher volume,
mhm,
and the human interaction might get lost because there's just a glut of it. So I'm always like, "How are you? How's it going today? You good? Yeah." I go, "When you off? You know, like, what's your time? It's getting there." Like, I just try to do like this little mini pep talk. I'm sure they're like, "Who's this?"
Yeah.
I don't care. I want to break up the monotony because then the next person that they're going to talk to, who knows what they need? And that's another way I can indirectly affect and create more of a way to care for others, but I don't have to do it if we can nurture and nourish some of the people that are caring for them in our place.
I feel that way about delivery drivers.
Mm,
I mean, I feel like, yes, I embarrass my kids by how much I talk to service workers because I feel the same way. Like, I'm like, how many people are jerks to them? Like, I need to be like super nice. So they're like, oh, not all humans are bad.
yeah,
And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, I just thought of this time when we'd be at the store, like Mr. Z's, and dad would be chatting up the cashier. And I would be like, a kid just like, "Ah, stop. Like, why are you talking to them?" Like, and now I'm like, oh, I am that person. Oh, it
awesome.
comes full circle. Um, but yeah,
Mhm.
I agree that especially because of the volume of things arriving at my house, I see more delivery drivers. So yes, trying to find someone to extend some caring to is also a cool thing that you could do this holiday season if you want to focus on doing something that can give a little bump to that mental health. So we've been through competence, we've been through caring. We'll move to our third C, which is confidence. So
Mm,
we have talked about confidence. This is a good thing. Well, I'm just going to back up for a second. Mom, I know, we you talked about things can be familiar, uh to really still pay attention to that. So, yes, we have talked about confidence, but again, like, let's tune in and think about how it's showing up for us today, because I think one of the things with confidence, and again, what is it? It's this belief in yourself, in
mhm,
not only your worth, but your self-efficacy, like you can do it, and your ability to navigate challenges. And you talked in the beginning that maybe when we come into this season, we're like, I'm just holding my breath till the end, or I just need to get through. But if you can come at it with this attitude of like, oh no, I got this, that even when stuff does start coming at you that might uh be difficult to deal with, when you have that baseline of trusting in yourself, which again, I think confidence, that's a huge part of that, things feel a bit easier. And who doesn't
mhm,
want to feel a little bit more peace and ease, especially this time of year? And one thing that keeps coming up with my kids is, uh, they think that, being brave and having confidence is one of those things that happens and then you can go do the scary hard things.
mm.
And it's just, I keep coming back to it, but it's like, oh no, 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 no. It's the other way around. There's a scary hard thing and then you do it, right? You do the thing scared. That's still brave. I feel like even us, and if you're listening, like, if you are scared to do something, even if it's like answering a phone call, you don't know the number. Like, I feel like that's such a millennial thing to do. If you did something when you were scared, that's brave. That's brave. It doesn't matter what the thing was. If you're scared to do something and you do it, you are just being brave. Okay. It doesn't matter what you were scared of doing. That's brave. When you do something that's brave, that can build into your confidence. Whoa, I just did that. Okay, I just did that. So the confidence doesn't come first, everyone listening, right? You do something and then it builds your confidence. And we've talked about having wins journals before. It's because
Mm,
sometimes we need a reminder of all these things that we have done that we were scared to do or we didn't want to do, or were just major accomplishments, whether everyone reading the list would think that, or it would just matter to us. Because, right, at the end of the day, it just matters to
yep.
us. So, confidence, if we can think about it that way, that hey, maybe you take just a couple seconds today. What did I do? What's the last thing I did that was kind of like about, and I did it? And just think about it for 5 seconds. Whoa, I
Yeah.
did that. I did that. You're gonna get that little ooh, like, okay. And whether you feel it and notice and make a little boop noise or not, it's happening. And yeah, one time you do it, great. You know, we're going to do these things. We're going to build on these things and think about all the awesome, hard things that we've done, because you all have done hard things. You all have done things that you didn't want to do. You made it out the other side. You all
Mhm.
have accomplishments, big and small, throughout your life. And it's okay to take some time to think about those, because what that does to build you up will then help make the things you have to face in the future easier.
Mm.
Okay, that felt like a bit of a rant. I don't
No,
know.
I know. I hear your passion on that because that is something that we've both been trying to keep top of mind and feeding into that, which in turn has created emotional resiliency. That's the end product of that, is that you come right back in. You can do another hard thing and then you're like, yeah, I got this thing. And it's very cyclical for me, but there's also a way to feed into it, even if you're looking at things that are a circle, and it requires two things that really um, feel top of mind and also very intimate to me. And one of them is reflection. And that's what you're talking about, Clay. You're looking at a situation, making sure that you can acknowledge it. Yes, I need to take just a moment to reflect and to see what that was. So my brain gets another dose of that and is like, remember that. But that's coupled with self-care. So the reflection and the self-care go hand in hand, which is really easy to let one or the other one dump out. They are much more powerful when they are together. The reflection is a mental brain neuroplasticity thing, but so is the self-care. And before we got on and started recording, Claire and I were talking about working out like we do.
Like we
And
do.
and
I was
well, we
just gonna
do, but we have our own personal goals that continue to change and we add on to them. And that's very stimulating conversation. I really enjoy that because it's such a dynamic space. But the one thing that we agreed on pretty much 100% is that in times like these, pretty much it's 100% I don't feel like working out these days.
Mhm,
That in the 4:40 alarm goes off, I'm like, "No, thank you. I would prefer to do something else right now," and that would include sleeping more.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I really feel vulnerable and human when I do that, and I don't like how it feels, but I'm gonna acknowledge that's the reality. To say for most, if not all of us, that feeling of I don't feel like wanting to do that. And for me, movement is self-care. That is really a big self-care driver, not only for brain chemicals after I work out, but I get a chance to like sweat a little bit and my so I feel like there's metabolically things that are happening. That to me is a big win. And I suggest that for you guys too. People gotta move. We're not taking our clothes down to the river and beating stuff on rocks and physically moving. Like our lives are pretty sedentary. They can be. So movement is essential. Now, the hack of it is I don't ask myself if I want to go today. I've already got a plan for the week. I don't ask myself. What I do is when I'm done, I say, hey, was that worth it? 100% of the time, I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, it was. So if you're listening and you have that wishy-washy time, it doesn't have to be at 4:30 in the morning. It can be any time of the day or night. And you're like, should I do it? Don't ask yourself then. Just go and ask yourself when you're done. How was it? Do I feel better? And that's what your brain remembers then too. So it's this reflection and the self-care that go together that create this emotional resiliency that allows us to ride all the waves of all the challenges that can come with a heightened season like a holiday one.
Yeah, we were definitely in agreement on that. I'm like, man, I don't want to go any day. But it was coming up because I'm going to brag on my fourth grader for a second, but she made the sixth and seventh grade basketball team at her school. And so we got a basketball hoop, which is the first time I've lived with a hoop since I lived at home, mom. So it's been like
Nice.
kind of fun to go out, like shoot some hoops. Um, but I'll tell her, "Okay, it's out here, like, let's go practice shooting." She doesn't want to. And it's funny because 'cause I'm, like, laughing, I'm like, "Neither do I." But she thinks she's like, "Well, no, you work out all the time." I'm like, "You love it." I'm like, "Well, that's the thing." And it's funny because before we even had this conversation, mom, I had said the same thing. I'm like, "No, you don't ask if you wanna do it before because the answer is no." I never wake up, I'm like, "Yes, let me go work out," like that maybe 0.01% of the time.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, "Am I sick or something? Is this a dream?" But it's how do you feel afterwards?
Hmm?
And, hey, oh my god, like, she used to barely be able to make a layup. Like, it's a 10-foot hoop, and she's a little girl
Mm. Yeah.
and she still can't make a free throw, which she's kind of bummed about. But hey, we're working on it. And now, like a couple feet back, she's making shots. And I'm like, see, now
Mm.
look at after you just made that and we just practiced, like, how does it feel? She's like, oh, this is good. I'm like, so now the next time when you don't want to, you don't listen to that person. You think about how the person afterwards is going to be like, oh, yeah, this is great. I accomplished things. I put the time in. And and we're not saying 100%. Well, maybe for some people it's 100%. Sometimes it might be like a mat workout. But it doesn't have to be an amazing workout where you like, "Hey, that was a hard thing that I didn't want to do and I did it."
Yes.
That's the key there. Like,
Yes.
yes, I am a huge proponent of, and I know there's some brain chemistry and some reasoning why physiologically, but we should do things that we don't want to do. Like flex that muscle, especially of doing things that we don't want to do. And it just, there's lots of benefits there.
Yeah.
So,
It allows us to um, handle challenging things later on in the day. Like there's a really direct correlation between I did something hard here, I can do something hard here. Like it's because it's still recent memory. You've already set a bar for that. And again, you're right. I don't know exactly what the
there's like a
name
part
of
of the
that is.
brain that is like
Yes.
stimulated and it's I've lost it
But it,
here. Maybe you can comment if you're listening and tell me.
well, but I like that anecdotally, I know that that happens without even knowing that there's research on that because I have a recent memory of overcoming an obstacle, and then I can apply that in lots of different places because that keeps showing up.
Yeah.
The obstacles are always going to be there. I don't get mad at them. Now I'm just like, do I go around? Do I like go under it? Like where, I just feel like I've got more ability to tackle it and figure it out. Everything's figure outable.
Yeah. It's not if I'm going to figure it out, it's how I'm going to figure it out.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Moving on to the fourth C, we've got connection. So, connection is also very important when we're talking about wanting to focus on mental health. And, I think we all have an idea of what connection is. It's these mutual ties that we have with other people, whether it's our family, our friends, community ties that we have. And when you've got strong connections, you can get benefits from that, right? There's emotional support. Even just having that social interaction, which again, there's probably going to be more of maybe in your near future since it's holiday time, so it's going to contribute to overall well being. And then it can kind of give us this boost or this buffer to some of the other feelings that might be coming up, like anxiety. Like anxiety might be buffered by having a strong connection with others. So, Mom, how are you thinking about this C connection in terms of mental health, holiday time, how it's showing up for you?
Yeah, this is I think this is interesting in that I'm trying to look at it not as I want it to be, but as it is right now.
Mm.
That to me is a great baseline. In a perfect world, if I'm consuming a lot of Hallmark movies, then it's usually people are with all of their best friends for the holiday, and they're doing something that's really fun, and it just is. It's inclusive of everything that makes them feel good. I don't believe that's the truth. I mean, even though, Claire, we were together a couple of weeks ago, we don't live in the same state. So it's not going to look like we're going to have all of this close contact in real time, in person. We can do it digitally, which is awesome. I get grateful for that. But it's seeing the situation for what it is. So that's a big one because I won't see everybody that I love and I want to hang out with, but I will do my best to make choices that move me closer toward that. And sometimes I wind up being like, I'll see you in January. That works. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be like the 3 days right around Christmas if that's your holiday. It's reminding me of who's important in my life and who is in it now. Because there could be friends like from a long time ago that it's not feasible to do that right now. But who are the people that are just like maybe it's your neighbor who isn't somebody that's year round, somebody that you can hang in. But right now, that's a good connection. Maybe it's somebody at your church or in your your workout class or you're like somebody that is you wouldn't have said this is like my best buddy, but for right now, this is somebody that's a good connection. And I appreciate the what's happening now and how can I have a sweet conversation or have an interaction because there's things that are unexpected. You can go deeper with a relationship and you also are creating new connections that don't have to be traditional ones. They can be ones from whoever is in your circle right now. So the question is, who's in your circle right now? So that's the number one question on that because, you know, family and friends, everybody wants to feel seen, heard, and valued. So that's something that can be replicated through good listening, having eye contact. I don't have to tell you guys these things, but that those are some of the hallmarks of it. Now, the one thing I did want to talk about was you will be with people at least a little bit more than usual, most likely. What comes to mind for me is having conversations and um, having them in ways that feel nurturing and to the level of how well you know that person. If you don't know somebody really deeply and well, it doesn't have to be where you're bearing your soul. There's value in all the different types of relationships that you have. And as long as whoever, even if it's the cashier, did they feel seen and heard? That was worth it to me. That's worth it to me. And I think that makes it exciting for me too, because then it's like, who am I going to see today? How is this going to be? How can I have a conversation and really be intentional with the time that I'm in front of people, the time I'm going to be digitally with people, and the ones that I'm just going to be like on a text conversation with? All of them can be meaningful. All of them can provide that way to feel seen and heard and to notice that and not to think that it's less because I'm not face to face with somebody. I think that's the biggest thing for me. How about you, Claire?
Well, this is our first holiday in Baton Rouge, and so we spent, 5 years in a different town, and I've talked about it before, but we had, a lot of different grandmotherly type figures that lived all around us. Shout out Miss Margaret, Miss
Mm,
Ann, Miss Laura, Miss Edwina. But something that I've done since I've moved, which I'm going to say proud of myself for, is I've been calling them because, they're
mm,
not really cell phone people, but I've been calling their landlines and just chatting with them because they did act as like stand-in grandparents for the kids, around times like birthdays and holidays. And so we talked on Thanksgiving, but that's also my plan to reconnect the week of Christmas. And we're actually talking about driving over to Homa, uh, staying over there for a night just to go check in with everyone because when I was thinking of connection, I feel like it felt like a good time of year to reflect, like who is important to me, who am I reaching out to? And while you're right, I can't go and see everyone that I want to in person. It's important to me to be able to still be calling and touching base with these people because they were in our lives for a long time. They do care about us. And so that's how connection is showing up. Maybe there's someone that just kind of has fallen off the radar and you have the bandwidth and the want to just reach back out, even if that is a text.
mhm,
Like, and it doesn't even have to be holiday related, right? Like it can just, hey, what's up? So, um, I'm a fan of that you don't have to wait till a certain time of year, right? Like we're talking about all these tips now and you might be thinking like, yeah, January, like this, I'm really going to double down and focus on all this stuff, but like any day at any time, within reason, I know there's caveats, could be the time. So maybe your plate's totally full and you're like, I'm just reflecting on these things. There's nothing else I want to add. But maybe you're like, hey, there's one person that I want to give a
mhm,
phone call to. And that's okay. And that's a huge win. Like both of those is a win because you were thinking about it, evaluating how it fits in your own life. And so, yeah, for me, the connection is the phone calls. So excited
mm.
about that. We've got one more C here as we
One
round
more.
out our 5 C's. We had competence, caring, confidence, connection, and now we've got character. So I love
Mm,
the C.S. Lewis quote, character is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. I use that quote as well to say like integrity when my kids ask me, what does that mean? Um, so, thinking about your morals or your values, um, how are you thinking about this category, Mom?
ah, I, I have an overriding. I think of holiday seasons in the past and where you're around more people to our earlier conversations here. And with more conversations in social settings, the character part kicks in for me because in every interaction I have, I just want to show up true to me in who I am today with less gossip, if any, less negative talk. I don't want to ruminate on things. I want to, we, in the early days of Joyful Rebel, we talked about elevating the conversation, which that's in which can sound kind of haughty, but really what it is just being who you are without dipping below baseline because that can be kind of fun or kind of naughty or but then it turns into it can be kind of mean. And so and I'm
Mhm.
speaking for myself. So, if you're in, let's just say holiday parties and you're with a whole bunch of people, and let's say there's even alcohol present, inhibitions are down, conversation and topics can get in there that are maybe what you wouldn't have would be talking about if you were going out for breakfast with somebody. And I just believe that this piece of it is I want to stay true to my purpose and my alignment and my moral values and my sense of fulfillment. And that just means if I'm having a conversation, I know how I answer can either skew it one way and be provocative in one way, or I can neutralize it. I don't want to talk about other people, places, or things. I'd rather talk about ideas. Have anybody else ever texted something and then you walk it back because you're like, I'm not putting that in a text? Things like that, where it doesn't mean that we can't have those kinds of thought patterns. We don't have to act on them. And I feel encouraged and I don't mind being a point person on that. We're in conversations. I don't want to dip below the line. I want to be transparent. That's easier. That's a lighter way to live. Claire, when we were talking about this before, it's like, I don't want to like lie or say things because I don't want to have to remember that. That is a lifestyle that is complex and takes energy away from talking about things that are more interesting as opposed to just keeping my story straight. And I can say with full disclosure that I have not always acted that way. I have acted in a way where I have gossiped or said something that wasn't very nice about somebody else. And I'm like, that makes my heart hurt because I would never want to be mean to anybody. I
Mhm.
don't. But sometimes you get caught up talking to somebody, and I have enough agency that I
Mhm.
know where I'm coming from, that regardless of what the situation I'm in, I can still act, react, engage, and be who I am without compromising these things that are so important to me. Is that making sense?
Yeah, and I think I agree that in the past I have, said or been part of conversations or been leading conversations. That's just it didn't feel like who I was. It was what I was doing, but then I'd be like, ugh, like you get that dissonance of like icky. Like I don't like that. And one of the biggest changes, I think, cutting out alcohol for me
Yep.
because how many of those situations were because, oh, we were drinking some wine and then, oh, yeah, let me just complain about so and so. And then it takes a turn and you're in it. And oh, it's funny at the time. And then the next day you're like, oh, I feel horrible for having said whatever, even if that person's never going to find out. Like, I just don't want to be that person. I don't think deep down I am that person. And something about not putting myself in those situations, not drinking, it's like you really get to know who you are because
Hmm.
I mean, not I don't want to get up on any type of soapbox, but if you're drinking cuz you feel bad or you're drinking cuz you feel happy or you're drinking cuz you're stressed or you're drinking cuz you're celebrating, you're dampening all those times. Like you're not
Mm.
letting yourself feel those that way. Like you just can't. It's a chemically you cannot truly feel what you're feeling because you're taking a depressant. So, uh to be able to sit with myself, to feel all my feelings, you know who you are way more. I'm like, okay. And then now I can say with confidence, like, I am not someone who's going to sit there and be a part of those conversations. And mom, like I was telling you before this, I had the opportunity to form a lot of new relationships since the fall, because I'm in this new program. And I have not had any conversations devolve that way. Like, I just don't, I'm not even a part of conversations like that. And if they were to go certain, like, I'm just not that person. People don't consider me the person they're going to go
Yeah.
gossip with. And even if it were to take that turn, I feel confident of being like, like, nah, like, that's not for me. I don't want the after effects of feeling that, ooh, I did something that wasn't in alignment with who I know I am. Before it used to be who I think I am. Now it's like, no, who I know I am. I'm
Hmm.
not down with that. And so um that's how I feel like it showed up for me, especially recently, of like being able to cut out booze really getting clear on my character and then finding these little ways that it's popping up like, oh, I noticed I'm not like a guy. Yeah, I might complain about like an assignment with a professor and all that, but like in terms of like cutting other people down, like
Yeah.
just not interested. Like not that's not a conversation I want to have.
Hmm. Well, if you have an issue with somebody, you go to that person.
Hmm.
And that feels like the direct route. But I think what you said was so important. And it landed so strongly for me too, is that if you don't behave like that, people don't see you like that. So they don't
Hmm.
come to you with those conversations. And that is a wonderful thing. So if you're feeling like you've engaged in that type of behavior that you're not super proud of, or just from an integrity standpoint, that can change. So you can stop that, and then people, like, it doesn't go come overnight, but after a while people just don't see you that way. You're not the go-to for that, because guess what? If somebody really wants to have conversations like that, they'll go find somebody. If it's not you, they'll be like, I'm going to move on and go find somebody else that will engage in that. And I hope that the light bulb goes on for them. I hope that they can feel more in alignment, and feel like they have a real clarity in their character and what's important to them. And I don't mean that as a weapon. I mean that from a truthful heart posture. But some of that's for them to do their work. And we can not be in that nitty gritty because we're still working on us too. And we're also providing an example in little and big ways that people can see what that's like. Like if bait is being given on somebody and you don't pick it up, you ever had that? And people are like, that kind of half a second of awkwardness. And you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and they're like, oh, I guess we're not going to do that. Like, yep, no, we're not gonna. Because there's other things to talk about that situation depending on how you're interpreting it. I could either talk about that person, I could ruminate that this thing is bad, or I could say, like, gosh, I hope everything's okay. And it changes things drastically. And I don't mind having that responsibility of living in a way that people can look at. And for some reason, they're like, that was different. I don't know what that was, and maybe I can't even consciously understand it, but it stopped the train from leaving the station of going down a predictable route that usually doesn't feel good later. I don't mind being a part of that. That's a rebel thing. That's like, I am
Hmm.
willing to take that hit,
Hey.
right? But I'm willing to take that hit because it does feel true. It feels long term. It feels authentic. And then it brings the conversation up because there's just so many other more interesting things to talk about.
100% agree. Well, I hope you listening enjoyed our conversation today. I know I did. We we went by plan, but I think we also had some kind of light bulb moments happen that we talk about. So I hope that as you're listening, that happens with you too. Like, oh, okay, that's a cool way to think about that. And as you know, we are in this holiday season. You know, what are we trying to say? Not to do 10 million new habits, not to reassess and reevaluate your whole life, unless that's what you want to do. Uh, but really, it's these little small tips, these strategies you can do. And we just want to introduce some more peace and ease a
Mhm.
little bit, even if it's a little bit. What's one thing you can do? And even if that's just some reflection, that's a win. So, thank you so much, as always, for listening, for joining us today. We really enjoyed it. We love connecting with you. Until next time, Rebels.